In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. I like action movies. That's because I'm so gentle and kind, you see. And one that I particularly like is the 2024 film, The Beekeeper. In the movie, a former operative of a clandestine organization known as the Beekeepers is drawn back into action after a close friend, a retired school teacher, falls victim to a phishing scam and commits suicide after losing all her money. Adam Clay, the beekeeper, played by Jason Statham, embarks on a brutal campaign of vengeance against those responsible, uncovering a vast conspiracy of national implications that leads all the way up to the White House. The film delivers a message about the importance of justice, particularly for weak and vulnerable people targeted by scams and frauds. It portrays the scammers as mostly young, bright men and women who prey on the innocent, the vulnerable. These people have no conscience. They have no sense of right and wrong. Now, The Beekeeper resonates with audiences because the storyline is so true to life. If you're a senior, you probably have been warned by the AARP or Medicare to beware of scams, Medicare scams, credit card scams, health scams. There are unscrupulous people out there who have no compunction about preying on the elderly and finding ways to steal their money. They are truly despicable human beings. Now, in our gospel today, we meet a man who is determined to get all he can out of life. In fact, he's nothing more than a little sleaze, a dishonest, self-serving crook. But he's more than a crook. He's a wheeler and dealer, a hustler, who's always trying to get something more out of someone else. If you fire this guy, he'll file a complaint with the labor board. He'll try to squeeze all that he can out of you. Forget integrity, honesty, or character. So in our gospel story, when he gets his termination notice, he doesn't apologize or even attempt to make restitution for the money that he stole. Instead, he asks, "What am I to do? How can I survive?" You see, in those days, there's no unemployment insurance, no unfair labor practices board, no lawyer to take his case. So he does the next best thing. He goes to his boss's creditors and does some double dealing, hoping to gain their favor. Now, if you're in business, you may have come across someone like this man. Shady, corrupt, not to be trusted, out only for himself. Now, such people are everywhere. They're even in the most respected institutions, but they have no moral compass, no conscience, no sense of right and wrong. You know, I love the story about Henry Ford, the inventor of the automobile. He was visiting his family's ancestral village in Ireland, and two trustees of the local hospital solicited him for a donation. And they talked Ford into giving the hospital $5,000, which in those days was a lot of money. This is the 1930s. And the next morning at breakfast, Ford opened up the daily newspaper to read the headline, "American millionaire gives $50,000 to the local hospital." And Ford was outraged. And he summoned the two trustees. He waved the newspaper in their faces and demanded, What does this mean? And the trustees apologized profusely, claiming it all had been a dreadful error. They offered to get the editor to print a retraction the very next day, declaring that the great Henry Ford had not given $50,000, but only $5,000. And hearing this, Ford offered them the full $50,000 under one condition: that the trustees would erect a marble arch over the entrance to the new hospital and place upon it a plaque that read, "I walked among you, and you took me in." Now, the little sleaze in our gospel is such a person. He takes all he can, steals all he can, grabs all he can. And you would think Jesus would want to challenge this money-grabbing mentality. We would expect that this little sleaze would be discovered by his boss, who would turn him over to the police, where he'd rot in jail. God's justice triumphs again. That would be an interesting parable, but it is not the story Jesus tells. Instead, Jesus says that the master called the sleaze into his office who had stolen all his money, and he commends him. The master tells him that he thinks he's great for behaving the way he did. And what's more, the gospel says that Jesus commends both the master and the crook. Now, what are we, moral, upright, righteous people, to make of this story? On first reading, I got to admit, it seems very offensive. Here's a story about a little thief who got caught, who realized the precariousness of his situation, and he took drastic, if not criminal, action. And the master commends the servant for his savvy. It's surprising, it's disrupting. It makes us feel deeply uneasy that Jesus would say what he does. But maybe this is what Jesus wants to do. He wants to surprise us and disrupt us because he's making a crucial point. Jesus is essentially saying, here is the world's way of doing things. The manager was keen, astute, and shrewd in his dealings to take care of himself. But then Jesus says, now learn this important lesson from this little sleaze. If the people of this world, to secure a temporal future, are willing to expend all their time and talent for insidious purposes, what should be said of the children of the kingdom who need to secure their eternal future? You need to invest more in eternity than in tomorrow, is what Jesus is concluding. You know, our nation, the United States, has produced the greatest entrepreneurs in the world by far. There is no other nation that comes as close as us in producing people who know how to make money. You think of all the entrepreneurs in our country who are billionaires. The last figure that I saw is that over 1,000 billionaires are now in our country. Over 1,000. Only several years ago, it was 300. Think of Jeff Bezos of Amazon, Bill Gates of Microsoft, Larry Ellison of Oracle, Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX. NVIDIA, a microchip company, now has a market value of over $4 trillion. It is more than any other company in the world. Its founder and CEO, Jensen Huang, was born in 1993, and he is now one of the richest men in the world. Now, if Christianity grew at the same rate as NVIDIA, every person in the world today would be a Christian. NVIDIA and other companies are wildly successful. So my question is, what are they doing to grow their businesses that the Church of Jesus Christ is not doing to grow its membership? Why are we declining while they're growing? Now, there was an article in the Harvard Business Review several years ago with the title, "Can Entrepreneurs Save the World?" Now, I don't believe that they can, but I give them credit for trying. They are people with a passion for their products. They believe in what they're doing, and they're willing to make sacrifices for their products, for their companies. But you have to ask yourself, where is life leading them? Where are they going? Where will they end up? Roberto Gozzietto was for many years the chairman and the CEO of Coca-Cola. And under his leadership, Coca-Cola was wildly successful, in part because of his passionate commitment to the product. He truly believed in Coca-Cola. In a speech delivered to the Executive Club of Chicago on November 20th, 1996, Roberto Gozzietto said this: "At Coca-Cola, we have built and grown for more than 110 years. Not long ago, we did some research and came up with an interesting set of facts. 1 billion hours ago, human life appeared on Earth. 1 billion minutes ago, Christianity emerged. 1 billion seconds ago, the Beatles performed on the Ed Sullivan Show. 1 billion Coca-Colas ago was yesterday morning. And the question we are asking ourselves now is, what must we do to make 1 billion Coca-Colas ago be this morning?" Now, as you can tell from his speech, Roberto Gozzietto truly believed in his product. He was passionate about Coca-Cola. He was an evangelist selling Coke to the world. But you have to ask yourself, what is Coca-Cola? You know what it is. It's flavored soda water. That's all it is. Flavored soda water. Roberto Gozzietto believed in his product, and he prospered by it. However, a short time after giving that speech, he would be diagnosed with cancer, he would have painful chemotherapy, and eventually he would die. Now, I have to tell you, the redeeming thing about Roberto Gozzietto was that he was a devout Roman Catholic. He was a very generous man. And he came to this country as a boy from Castro's Cuba to lead one of the premier companies in the United States. He's an American success story. And money was never the be-all and end-all of his life. In fact, his son became a Jesuit priest. But Jesus wants us to think not just about temporal security, but eternal security. We need to invest more in eternity than in tomorrow. Otherwise, we'll end up our days and be filled with regret for wasting so much of our life on focusing on that which passes away rather than that which truly lasts. Peter Gomes, the former dean at Harvard University's Memorial Chapel, recalled the words of a widow at her husband's funeral. Now, the man had died of cancer in his late 40s, and she talked about the publications that he kept by his bedside during the final months of his life. And she displayed a copy of Gentleman's Quarterly magazine. She mentioned all the clothes in his closet. She showed a catalog of Porsches, and she referred to the sports car that was in his garage. And one by one, she went through the magazines and the books that represented a life of enormous success. And then she explained that as her husband's cancer brought him closer to death, the pile of reading material became shorter until by the time he died, the only two books by his bedside was his Bible and the prayer book. I want you to think about that. If we genuinely believe that life is about grabbing what we can, we are deluding ourselves. We are like the man who got a seat on a lifeboat as the Titanic was about to sink. And just as the boat was to be lowered into the ocean, a stranger offered this man a fistful of money for his seat on the lifeboat. And the man in the lifeboat accepted the offer. He exchanged his seat with the stranger who handed him all his money. He gave up his seat because he valued the money more than his life. And he went down to drown when that boat sank, with all the money in his pockets. Now, here's the question. Did the man have the money, or did the money have the man? Now, Jesus says we must invest more in eternity than in tomorrow. There are some things that last and some that don't. Some things are of true value and others are passing away. There's a time for fun and games, but there's also a time to be deadly serious about our future. Rudyard Kipling once told a group of McGill University students, "Be certain that you do not care too much for the material, because someday you will meet someone who does not care for it at all. And then you will recognize how poor you really are." And that's good advice, especially in our consumer culture. It's wise for us to heed. Invest your life in securing an eternal future. Invest more in eternity than in tomorrow, says Jesus, and you can't go wrong. Amen.